Okay, everybody, thank you for attending this September 2021 CDF meetup. I am Tracy Reagan, the host of this madness. I have been for a little over a year now, and we've had some really amazing talks over the course of the last 2 years. And this one is in particular of interest to me because of my continued effort to bring more women into the open source community. But before we jump into that, let me just give you a few tips here. I will shortly, I am going to unmute everyone. So if you ask questions during this presentation, you can. So please be considerate and mute yourself once I unmute you so that if there's no background noise, and if there is, then I will mute you if I can figure out where the background noise is coming from, but that would be super helpful. And just a discussion about what's coming up for the CDF online meetups. We will not be doing one in October. October is a busy month. We have coming towards the end of this month, we have DevOps World, and then following that, we will go right into the October season. There's KubeCon coming up. So there's kind of a lot of stuff happening over the course of the next 6 weeks. So we're not going to compete with that, but we will be doing something probably just before Thanksgiving. I am looking at bringing on a woman by the name of Rosalind Radcliffe, who's a distinguished engineer at IBM and has been recently published on testing in the CD pipeline. And if any of you have ever spoken to me, you know that I keep harping on the fact that we need to have more testing information and testing thought leadership when it comes to DevOps and the CD pipeline. So we're hoping that we can get her to speak, and that will probably be sometime in the middle of November. As a reminder, we have DevOps World coming up at the end of this month, and then in the middle of October is KubeCon. So if you haven't signed up for DevOps World or KubeCon, I would highly recommend doing that. I think DevOps World is a free virtual event, and I believe KubeCon has a virtual component to it, so you'll be able to attend most of the sessions, I believe. I think the thing you'll miss out on is probably walking through the show floor. And maybe someday we'll have little robots where we get to walk through the show floor, which would be really cool. So on that, I am going to introduce Evelina Vilcott. I found her because I saw her name pop up on a governance board for Jenkins. And of course, I got very excited because there was a woman's name for being on the governance board for the Jenkins open source community. And if you've ever looked at the Jenkins community, you'll see that women are probably underrepresented. So I was super proud that the Jenkins community introduced her as a governance board member. And we chatted a bit, and I asked her to tell her story about how she got involved in open source. Now, for the ladies out there, we are not represented well in open source. We need to do better, and I understand why that's the case. The case may be that women have a lot of other tasks to do at home. We take care of our children more than men, just as the fact. We might even be more involved in taking care of aging parents. So it does make it harder for women to participate. So those of you who are out there who can, I encourage you to do so. And I think that Evelina's presentation might help do that. So in that, I want to give a warm welcome and applause for Evelina, even though we're remote. It's kind of weird to say an applause, but let's celebrate her. And Evelina, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Tracy. So thank you for introducing me. I'll tell you a little bit more about who am I. Just before I start, yes, I want to share my open source journey with you, but as Tracy mentioned, I'm a woman, and certain aspects of the talk will touch upon that subject. But of course, there are big parts of becoming involved with open source that I think will be of interest to every one of you. So now I just have to make my presentation work. Who am I? My name is Ewelina Wilkosz, and I work as a consultant at Verifa. I'm based in Sweden, and in my consultant work, I specialize in continuous integration, continuous delivery, and a lot of things that are happening around it. And at the end of the day, I just wish that the developers I work with are just are liking their work a little bit more, or maybe at least they don't hate it more than they did before after what I did for them. I have experience from before as a web developer for a while, where I was facing customers directly. That was pretty fun, and then I learned to really care about how the people that are using things I'm working on are feeling about it. And then for a few years, I was working as a software developer for Ericsson. And my open source software experience revolves mostly around Jenkins, specifically about Jenkins's code at the beginning, and now a little bit more since, as Tracy mentioned, I become a member of Jenkins Governance Board. So that's exciting. Yeah, why am I even talking about my open source journey to you today? That was Tracy who contacted me and asked me to speak about it. And my first reaction was like, why would I? Who would even want to hear about it? It's nothing really big. It's not that interesting, and probably everyone has a very similar experience. And then I realized that this is the way I often think about myself. Maybe now a little bit less because I met great people at work or in the community. So I feel a little bit more confident about myself. But it's still, you know, around this thought that, you know, it's nothing special. But Tracy asked for a meeting, and we talked, and I actually shared part of the journey with her. And then I realized that, yeah, I mean, this is not that bad. I enjoy talking about it, at least. So maybe some of you will enjoy listening. And yes, that's why we're here. So before I can talk about how I ended up being involved with open source, I think I have to, or I want to talk about how I become involved with IT. And there is a lot of initiatives, and people are trying to attract women to IT or other minorities because we are underrepresented. And I, as a person who is you know, the subject in that discussion, I find it very complicated issue. And I know what worked for me and why I chose IT, and I think that's something I want to share. So the first thing that is not so obvious, or maybe it is for some of you, is I think my parents did a great job when I was a little girl. So I do honestly believe that this bringing women to IT becomes in a kindergarten or somewhere, not where the women are at the university and you're just trying to drag them to the companies. I think that's an important work too, but I think it should start much earlier. So my parents were very focused on making sure that I think for myself and I make decisions for myself based on something that makes sense, not because Sylvia is doing that. That was never a reason good enough for them to let me do something. And it's not like they didn't let me do anything, but it was important for them to make sure that I understand that I have to think before I do certain things. And no one can tell me what I can and cannot do or what I'm capable of. And that stuck. And I think it helped me be a little bit more brave and think a little bit more every time before I make an important decision, what I feel about it, not what I don't know, society thinks about it. And then when I was 9 or 10 years old, I got a new math teacher at school, and she was the best teacher and one of the best people I have ever met. Maybe the fact she was a woman helped her to have this compassion and focus on making sure that this girl will work hard because apparently she's capable of doing a little bit better. But she did much more than that. She showed interest and spent a lot of energy on everyone. It's not like she was focused on, pushing this girl or this boy or whatever, her favorite pupil to do the great thing. She was spending time with every pupil, those that needed a little bit more help to do the simple stuff, and those that were ahead of the rest and needed a little bit more challenge. And she made math fun for me. And she also made it, she's the one who didn't let me choose one thing. She basically chose high school for me, and it was a good choice. But already in elementary school, I faced the first meltdown from a boy that was very, very offended by the fact that I did a little bit better than him. And that was something very difficult for me to understand, because until then I lived convinced that, we're all the same. And then the university came. And then I did have a little bit more of those, maybe not meltdowns, but I had to face situations where I had to prove that I'm not just a silly girl. There were some people, professors or students, that were not even allowing me to prove anything. They were just like, I don't talk with girls about math. So that felt so silly. I was just like, okay, I'm gonna forget about you. But the majority of the people weren't like that, obviously. And there were really, really great professors that were very encouraging. And I'm a carrot kind of person. Stick doesn't work on me, but if someone behaves like they believe I'm gonna do best, I'm gonna do even better to kind of make sure that they are not disappointed. So that worked. And I ended up working as a software developer. And totally different side of this story is also the fact that the choice is very pragmatic. I don't really know how it exactly looks in other countries, but I know in Poland and probably countries around Poland or east from Poland, it's not that easy to make a living. And if you want to be an independent person, doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, you have to work in IT, or IT is one of a few areas where you can work and actually earn decent money. So there it is. The choice was quite simple. I felt good at technical stuff. I liked maths and physics, and I wanted to live a nice life. So I chose IT. And then at some point during my IT journey, the open source adventure started. I think it was 2017 when I moved out of Kraków to join a Scandinavian consulting company called Pragma. And I didn't really know much about them, except the fact that they seem to be doing exactly what I was doing the last time I was happy at my previous employer. And I'm like, yes, I want to work for these guys. And then I got to meet the founders and my potential future colleagues, and they seemed so happy at work. So I made a decision to move out of Kraków, and I came to Copenhagen. And I already few weeks into my work, when I barely knew anything really, I knew Git, and that was all. And I've seen Jenkins before, but I never really used it. They told me they have this project where they try to make it possible to configure Jenkins with code. And also there is a customer where they need a little bit of help with their current Jenkins instance, and maybe they are a good candidate to introduce this as code solution for them. So I got a little bit of time to make myself familiar with this Jenkins as code solution they had, and off I went to the customer. And the Jenkins instance they had was giving me heart attack every day almost, because it was so old and so shaky and unstable. I was really, really worried to touch anything. The first step was to actually bring this instance to a state where they can build stuff. So just make it work. No as code approach at this stage. And I was producing insane amount of screenshots, really insane amount of screenshots. I had to like keep them in a different folder because every time I was changing something in Jenkins, job configuration or the global Jenkins configuration, I was taking a screenshot before making a change because there is no undo button in Jenkins, or there was nothing like, preserving the configuration, except of course I could save XML files, but it's not the easiest file to read. And I survived that, and the Jenkins was working. We started talking about introducing the solution I mentioned before. And then I just fell in love with the solution instantly because it actually allowed me to skip the whole screenshot experience and just do stuff. And if things didn't work, I could always revert to the state that I had saved in the configuration files. So on the result side, the solution was perfect. The usability side was not that great. It required Jenkins to restart every time you wanted to make a change. And it was quite time consuming, and it also required me to write a piece of groovy code for every plugin I wanted to configure. And that was fun because, I enjoy troubleshooting and I enjoy like solving those little issues. So it was interesting, and as I say, I had a little bit of fun. But at some point, it becomes a little bit exhausting if you have a lot of plugins you have to configure that way. And one thing about Pragma that I learned after I joined, or I figured out what they actually mean by it, they were really, really involved with open source already. So there was a lot of people in the company that were contributing to open source. So I become familiar with this concept that every person can just create something and share it with everyone, or contribute to a project, small, unknown project, or a really big project that thousands or millions of people around the world are using. And there can be people sitting around me that are just making a change and are helping others for free. Since the software we were contributing to, or the company was contributing to, was usually a free software. So we did want to make this as code solution also something that, it's worth sharing. And I didn't feel that it was worth sharing, but it wasn't maybe good enough that everyone, even people without a software development experience, could use, because there's a lot of Jenkins maintainers, administrators that are really not software developers, and expecting them to write a piece of code, figure out what to write every time they want to configure something. Well, I guess some of them wouldn't like it. So I started talking with my colleagues if we can make it better, if we can make it work faster, if we can skip the restart requirement, because when you use Jenkins in a traditional way, you don't have to restart it every time you want to make a change, like change the amount of executors or on a build agent or something like that. You don't have to restart Jenkins for that. So why we have to have this requirement in our solution? So there was a little bit of brainstorming, and we came up with an idea. We want to do it a certain way. And then I really don't remember how it happened, but I got in touch with Koske and Nicolas Delouf, who were, I guess, already before thinking about a very similar solution, because I have to admit, I'm not the person who came up with the idea that Jenkins should be configurable as code. There is plenty of people around the world that were hoping for a solution like that, or were trying to prepare a solution like that. And again, thanks to, as far as I understand it, of course, thanks to Pragma's involvement with open source, the communication channels between Jenkins community and Pragma were open and like well established. So it was easy to start being involved with the community in a like a very direct way. So that's how it started, really. I had a meeting with Koske and Nicola, and some other people probably had been there too, but it was a long time ago. I'm sorry, I don't remember all the names. We talked about what we are working on and what they are expecting from a solution like that. I remember I had a little piece of paper with things that I want the new solution to have, that I believe are important. And I think Koske was the first one talking about their expectations, and I was just listening and looking at this paper in front of me, and then I was like, okay, he talks about that and that and that. It's like totally aligned with what I want, and that felt so good, that this big guy is having a similar idea to mine, or at least we agree on some things. So that was a really nice boost. And then we started working. We decided that we want to make the configuration as code solution, and we started working. Nicola, Oleg Nienashev, Mets Nielsen, and a few other colleagues from Pragma. Very quickly, I think some other people that were Jenkins community members, contributors already, or some completely new people started joining. I didn't really do that much development. I always feel a little bit weird about when people say I created Jenkins as code. Well, I was part of the team that kicked it off, and I was very much involved for a long time, but I can't pretend that I did it. There was a lot of work and really great software developers all around the world involved that did some magic there. And I feel I have to say it because I'm very grateful for them for doing that. But I'm saying it also is to highlight the fact that you don't have to be a developer superstar or feel very confident about your skills to actually contribute in a significant way to open source project. There are community tasks, there are events where you can talk, there are, like the functionality you can try to help plan. A lot of things around creating the software that are not related to writing software that a lot of people can do. I think many projects suffer from documentation, and contributing to documentation or like some demos is a huge benefit for the users or whatever software or project people create. So you don't have to feel super confident about your software development skills, or you don't have to be a software developer at all to actually contribute significantly to open source software. So yes, that's how it started. And then I became the JCASC, Jenkins Configuration as Code was the name of the plugin we created. So in the company, I have became the JCASC person, go-to whenever a customer needed Jenkins. And thanks to that, I got to meet a lot of people, very small companies or very big companies that are using Jenkins in very, very different ways. And I learned what are some of the pains and they are facing, and some weird things they are doing, and some crazy things they are doing. But also, yeah, what's the most difficult? What's the biggest challenge? Why would they decide to move to another software, or why would they decide to stay with Jenkins? And I think that part of my experience helped me make my way to Jenkins Governance Board. I was talking with some of the members after I was nominated. Before, like I was trying to figure out should I accept, should I not, and yeah, maybe at this point it's also interesting to mention. Again, as a woman in IT, I always have this thing at the back of my head, like, am I here because I'm good, or am I here because of the quota, or what are people thinking about me? So there was a lot of doubts like that around in my head. but after some consideration, talking to Oleg, that helped me a lot. I realized that this is not helping anyone. I'll just try to participate in the election, be a candidate, and see how it goes. And also Oleg, in a very nice way, explained why he believes this governance board would benefit from me being part of it, highlighting the fact that I do have a direct contact with a lot of very different Jenkins users, and that made a lot of sense. And I think in a lot of situations when I was having doubts, I was just very lucky to have good people around me. As I mentioned, kind words from some, or just figuring out that me and them are thinking the same way. It was a boost. So there was a lot of people that were part of this Jenkins configuration as code plugin and development that helped me, I don't know, become a better consultant and more confident community member. It wasn't always easy, like we're all people. I think the biggest challenge with open source communities and contributing is that in a lot of situations, you work with people that you've never met. And I learned from my experience that it changes a lot when you get to meet the person and talk to the person and figure out how this person speaks. Because if you don't know someone and you speak to that person and you just read what this person writes in the mail, on the message board, Jira issue, Gitter, wherever, you project some things. You can imagine that this person is very angry with you because that's what you would write if you were angry, and the person on the other side might be very calm and kind and just have a certain way of communicating things. So that is challenging. And also, even if you meet people, I at the beginning was very intimidated whenever I was meeting those people that I knew were involved with the community for a long time and were names that I knew. So I was scared of Oleg, I remember there was a situation with some security issue that I mentioned without actually knowing that there is a certain procedure. And of course, after I was told that I did it in the wrong way, it made a lot of sense that I should not blab about the security issue before we actually have the security issue solved, because that's not smart. So I was super stressed for a day because I imagined the worst. Of course, like I'm terrible and they are also angry with me. And yeah, maybe some people were, but no one really was mean. And I don't think anyone was really, I don't know, as disappointed in me as I imagined. So it's not always easy. It is a bit scary sometimes, but overall, it's like we're all people, and we just have to understand that the communication is a difficult art. There is a few things that I want to share with people that never contributed to open source or are just starting or are figuring out if they really want to do that. And of course, again, this is my experience. This is not, silver bullet. This is not like only true facts and nothing else matters. This is how I feel, and this is what I learned. So the way for me to start contributing now, if I wanted to join totally different project, find a project you know about and figure out the community around it, the way they communicate and which tools they are using. I think it helped for me with Jenkins and Jenkins configuration as code, that I was really excited about the solution and I really wanted to make it better. And probably people have different motivators, and it's easy for some to just jump anywhere and do stuff. It was important for me that I really cared about the project. So I knew a little bit about Jenkins. I knew what I want from configuration as code, and then I got involved with the community. And each community, I guess, have different way of communicating, and they use different tools. It's pretty complicated with Jenkins right now for me because I'm losing the track of what and where. But I think we're trying to make it clear, or maybe it's clear for everyone. Maybe I'm just messy. The bottom line is there are different tools, and if you want to work on a project, you have to be able to communicate with people. So check if sometimes there is a Gitter button in the README file of the repository for the project that you're interested in contributing to. So you can jump there and just start talking to people, or maybe they just use GitHub issues. Well, you have to figure out. Then you find the source code and you clone it or fork it. Sometimes I was actually trying to find a project that has a nice contributors guide, and I didn't, but I'm sure there are projects that have it perfectly well described. How are you supposed to, what's the workflow? How are you supposed to contribute the changes? But you can always clone, if it's an open source project, you can always clone it. Maybe you want to fork it and work on the side first. And the most important thing for me is figure out how to build your project, the project you want to contribute to, before you make any changes. Because if you start messing around and then you try to build it, and it fails, you never know if it's you or, I mean, there are ways to figure out, of course. But it's nice to have a clean project. You haven't touched it, figure out how to build it. And I did find in few Jenkins plugins, I was trying to figure out that there was a very nice information in the README how to build it. So first, make sure that your build is in good shape and you know that it works. And then when you start playing, so you do stuff, whatever you want to do. And sometimes it's only a documentation update. And of course, only is a very bad word to use here, because I do think, as I mentioned, a lot of projects would benefit from improved documentation. So there is nothing little about improving documentation, but yeah, it can be that. It can be a change in the code. And then most likely you just submit the PR and you see who picks it up and how it goes further. So it really is simple, I think. And this slide, actually, I don't know what it was 2 years ago when I was presenting for the second time at DevOps World. Maybe it was called Jenkins World then. Still, I don't remember perfectly well, but anyway, it wasn't my first time, but it was the first time I was presenting alone, and I made a few changes in the presentation, and I added a little slide about how to start contributing to open source, and it was basically clone it, find a way to build it, and submit a PR. And for me, it was like, this is like the most basic thing, and like no one will really pay that much attention to it, but I'll put it there. And this was the slide that was that got the most positive feedback, because it's so easy to assume that what you know is obvious. It's easy for me. Again, I can't speak for the rest of you. But very often there are things that I didn't know how to do, had no idea, and then I learned, and they became those things that are very difficult to explain suddenly because they are so basic. And it's in no way me disrespecting people who doesn't know it yet. I just don't think that, I did something great because I figured it out. So it must be basic. Anyway, people were very, very grateful, and I got some kind words from attendees who said that it was a cool thing to show. So yes, here it is a little bit extended. And there's a few things that I think you should remember when you consider contributing to open source when you're starting. Yes, there are many people that know much more than you do, but they can probably still learn something from you, or others will learn something from you. So just, don't start by comparing yourself with others. I did, and it was scary. And then those people turned out to be very kind and very helpful and very willing to share the knowledge. So I learned a lot. not only about software, but also about how the community should function and things like that. And community can be scary, but we're all people. And you will not like everyone, probably. You'll have hard time with some, but that's how all the relationship in life look like. And there's nothing different in the community. So, you know, don't expect the words and don't expect unicorns. Just try to find a way to communicate with people. And if you end up working with some people a little bit more close, then it doesn't hurt to try to get to know them a little bit better if they are okay with it. And the last point, your company may be more willing to let you do open source than you think. This is always a little bit shocking for me, that the company I worked for and company I work for now is happy with me spending my working hours contributing to open source projects. They are not making any money on me. I'm a consultant. I earn money when I'm at the customer and I do something for them. But I do believe that more and more open source projects are finding their way into big or small companies, and well, those projects have to work somehow, be maintained somehow, and it becomes more and more clear for people who make decision about money that investing in open source, it's not wasting money really. So yeah, as I say, that was a little bit shocking for me until I understand how this whole model works. But yeah, I think it's, if you want to start doing open source and you don't want to spend 20 hours a day in front of the computer, it may not hurt to check with your employer if they are willing to let you work a few hours a week on that. So that's something I would say you should try. And yeah, I think this is all I had prepared. I'm open for questions. I'm not sure if you have any, but we ended up a little bit ahead of time, but the story is not that long actually. So thank you.
Well, I would say you are exactly on time. We try to go 40 minutes of discussion and then questions. I want to say thank you. That was a brilliantly done presentation, and some of the things that you talked about really hit home for me. And I want to really give the Jenkins community kudos for fostering you basically in the beginning, listening to you and understanding that as an end user, you have a lot to input. And the CD Foundation in particular right now is really trying to grow their end user community. And I think that your story really defines why an end user community is important. And I speak to people often and try to encourage them to join open source communities. And I tell them, just as you pointed out, one of the first ways to get involved is to understand what features you'd like to see in the product and have a conversation with the community. And that is the way you begin. So thank you for pointing that out, and applaud to all of the Jenkins contributors who brought you up into this world and allowed us to have this conversation today, because I think there's a lot of women who need to hear it. You do have a few questions, and Oleg and Kroske, I know you guys are more than happy to just ask her directly, but I'll do this for you. Oleg asked, do you plan to participate in Hacktoberfest, and would you recommend others to join?
I actually haven't looked what's going on there yet, but definitely, especially since I don't know, I feel this becoming a Jenkins Governance Board member is I don't know, it's something that I appreciate, and I want to step up my game. So yes, definitely. And then I also, there is a lot of projects. There's Google Summer of Code, and I think there was a lot of Jenkins related projects happening around this. I know of another woman that I think started with Google Summer of Code. I'm saying I think because I don't really remember for sure. I tried to check that with her, but I didn't manage to get in touch with her. But I think Natasha Stopa started with one of those projects where She worked on the Jenkins plugin manager that was very much needed to be solved. I was actually hoping I'll hear from her how she got involved with open source community, but yeah, I think I started a little bit too late, so that didn't happen. But I think this is a very nice way to start your community involvement and open source contributing adventure.
And then Kosuke asked the million-dollar question here, which is, what do you think OSS projects in general can do better to pick up more Evelinas around the world?
Well, you know what worked for me? I had a great employer that empowered me and encouraged me. So I think, yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't have an clear answer. I just feel very, very lucky that I had good people around. So, you know, just look who's around you and try to encourage someone who's around you.
Yeah, that's sort of how we're approaching it. You know, the Ortelius community really looks up to the Jenkins community. We try to follow everything that the Jenkins community has done. And we have found that in terms of getting more women involved, it does take us reaching out to them, doing more mentorship and sort of helping them and really encouraging them, which is a question that Steve Taylor had, is did you have a mentor?
I did have I would call him a mentor, Boo, my colleague that went to the first customer with me, and I was really looking up to him, and he was involved in open source. So he was also very encouraging. And imposter syndrome is not a rare thing in IT, especially for women, although I'm pretty sure there is a lot of very confident women, so I'm not saying that every woman suffers from that. But yes, I personally needed this carrot, as I mentioned, and I needed this someone who will kind of bring me up a little bit and make me think, help me think a little bit better or more confident about myself. And he's a great guy. He's very skilled guy, and it was nice to learn from him. So I think that did help a lot, that I was not alone. There was someone that was there for me to ask questions or push me in the right direction.
I think that is the case for anybody, male or female, but I think that women in particular need a little more encouragement. So I'm glad to hear that happened for you. And then Oleg asked a follow-up question about what your experiences are connecting your customers as working as a consulting firm and end users to the open source projects. Were you able to recruit?
Not yet, but I'm trying to apply some of the my community experiences within the company I currently work for. And they are not opening up just yet, but they are creating their own open source community, which is called, I guess, Inner Source there. And then I'm not the only person that is involved, and there is a lot of initiatives coming from them. But I think the fact that a few times when we had issue with Jenkins, that was pretty too difficult for me to solve. I was just reaching out, mailing list or something, and the problems got solved. So I think this is a way for them to understand that this open source contribution is an important thing. So actually, I think I get to work on open source projects on the customer time sometimes, because they know that in the end they are the ones benefiting from it. But I do in generally see the trend of companies having some kind of attempt into creating some kind of community. And sometimes it's just a community within the company. Sometimes it's reaching out further. But the customer I currently work with is in general pretty interested in learning about what's out there about Jenkins and things like that. So the more they know, the more interested they are.
And this next question is from Henry, and this is a meetup. If we were all in person in a room, we would all feel comfortable with making comments, and this is not just for Evelina to answer, I think. He asked, when starting to contribute to open source, how do you quickly learn the code base? Do you learn the entire one or focus only on certain parts of the source code? And I think that we'd love to hear from anybody on this call right now who's managing an open source community, because that is a great question.
Well, I tend to go for little pieces because sometimes the project is so big, like you just can't grasp it all. And I just want to have my little success, and then I build on top of that. But yeah, that's me.
Kosuke or Oleg, you have any comments, or Steve Taylor, you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think like one thing Jenkins got going is it's a fairly modularized code base. So, the core, which did grow over time, but still kept relatively small compared to the other massive projects. So I'd like to think it helped new people get into it relatively easily compared to other similarly sized projects.
Yeah, I'd be curious how you would take on something like Kubernetes, right?
Well, this is Steve. I think one of the things is when you look at the code base, is, like Kosuke said, is looking at how it's been modularized and focus on just one particular part that you really understand and start there and then work your way out and spread out from there. I think if you're going to dive into trying to make changes to the Linux kernel that has to do with Kubernetes, that may be a little bit above your initial pay grade. But starting with something modularized that's somewhat small will give you that success and be able to see how the pieces are put together.
And I thought it was interesting, Evelina, when you did your presentation, that everybody, that you got feedback about showing how to do a pull request. And I appreciate the fact that the comment on documentation and demos. I think that in terms of on the Ortelia side, that's the part we struggle with the most. And creating a contributor environment that is easy. So thank you for pointing that out, because I think it's important for us to remember that that is a critical piece of getting people to contribute, just to make it as easy for them as possible. And I know we have a long way to go to get it to that point.
Exactly. If you go to the GitHub repository and you find easily how to build the project and what's the procedure, should I fork, should I clone, how do I create a PR? If this is easy to find, then this project feels very welcoming to me. If it's not clear up front, it feels like it's some kind of exclusive group that knows about it, which is not always the case. In most situations, it's not, but that's the impression I would get.
I think that is definitely an area that we have to improve on it in Ortelius. I think probably Jenkins has gotten over that, but as a new project, I think that's an area we really should focus on. Any other questions for Evelina? Any comments? Well, everyone, thank you so very much for attending this. And this was really super helpful. And I hope that we can get this out to as many women as possible so that they can hear your story, because it's an important one. And I love the fact that you said it was scary, because I think that is something that every woman can hear, that it can be scary, and it's okay if it is.
Yes, very much.
All right, everybody, we hope to see you at DevOps World or KubeCon, and then we will do our next one in again in November, hearing about testing. And I really, really would like to have more conversations in 2022 around the testing topic and the CD pipeline, because things are changing with microservices, and it's an area I think that we really should focus on. On that, we will sign off, and thank you again, Evelina, for a great job.
Thank you for having me and giving me this opportunity.
Absolutely our pleasure.
Have a nice day. I'll have a nice evening, because it's, as I said, very dark here already.
Okay, thank you. That was awesome, girl. You did an awesome job.